I look at fungus as one of the oldest and smartest and largest organisms on Earth. And I think it is what we will make all of our computers out of in the future. Even though there's 8 billion humans, there's trillions of ants, but there's 60% of all the life biomass on Earth is fungus. So it's like, who's in charge? Is it the bees and the ants? Is it all the humans? Are we going to be in charge when robots take over and then AI does? It's really probably the fungus, because the fungus really is the dictator of like how everything's going to go down on Earth on a daily basis. Someone would say a radioactive mushroom, that's scary. I want to stay away from that thing forever. Me, it's like, no, I want that in my lab. I want to take it apart. I want to grow it again. I want to talk to it and go, what good can come out of that? Because it's very weird. And so it takes a scientist to really like be curious about that and not afraid of it. Learn how to talk to a cat, learn how to talk to a bird, learn how to talk to a dog, and then they become, oh, this person's cool. Same with the mushroom. Oh, this guy's gonna feed me. All right, I'm gonna not kill him. You know?
It's like I'm always telling thank you and have a good day to AI.
Yeah, I do the same big time, big AI user, and same with the mushroom. I consider them very equal. Computer can't be conscious. That's maybe 10 years ago you could say I don't know about that. But I worked on AI at Google in 2008. I always believed machines were conscious and could be conscious. And just like I thought a dog and a mouse and a tree was conscious, but like what level of that is, now we have some language to explain that. We've grown capacitors, so stored energy in mycelium, let it discharge into light bulbs and motors and batteries.
Oh
We've
my.
grown a battery out of mycelium and other fungi. So we can grow wires. That mycelium is like a wire and it will regrow, but it grows for food. Fungus's main goal is food. It eats everything. It's been eating things longer than everything else on Earth. So really, fungus is saying, "Where's the food? Give me my food. Who has my food? Leave my food alone." That's its ones and zeros. And if I translate that into binary, bits and bytes, food or no food, 0011 1111 0000. If those become the food signaling, I'm pretty sure that is like the translation between digital and biological. Well, I created this language called the Haifa programming language, and that is the same structure of C or an assembly language. And now you can have a machine interact with fungus, which we call the fungal computer interface, just like a brain computer interface, a BCI. We have a FCI.
And we're live. Hi, Morgan.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing good. How about you?
In the middle of waking up in the lab right now, so I'm still like half a coffee cup in, you know what I mean? I'm doing good though.
There, hugging the mushrooms.
Yeah, yeah. We can't see him over there, but I do have like all my powdered mushrooms that I drink every morning with my coffee. But I'm like a really dark, boring coffee drinker, and so I only put so many mushrooms in there.
So let's start with
Sure.
a fundamental question.
Yeah.
Why fungi?
Well, I've been a computer scientist my whole life, and learning how circuits work and wires. When I was really young, when I was born in 1987. First computers I got to see were little green circuit boards with copper on them. But my dad and my mom's dad were both born in the 40s. My dad was born in 1947. My grandpa, my mom's dad, was born in 1943, and they had a different view of computers. Their computers were very thick copper wiring and transistor tubes and things like that. So I got to see really old electronics as a little kid. And so I've seen like computer grow up, and started learning about nature really young as a kid, National Geographics and all of the organisms that live in the world. As a little kid, I had National Geographic, but I also had Popular Mechanics. So I got to see planes and machines and computers, and I got to see all the life on Earth. And throughout my life, I've seen the computer evolve. And then it kind of stopped, especially when we got the cell phone. They put a plastic case around it and you stop seeing the computer get better. And as I've learned about fungus and mushrooms and the main piece of fungus, the mycelium, I've always kind of thought about it as like that's kind of like a new wire, or it's like a growable wire, or it's like brain cells almost how they can rewire themselves and think. And so I've started to think of fungi in general like silicon or copper, like a material that you can make computers out of or do computing with. But we had to figure out how to do that with copper. Then we had to figure out how to do that with silicon. And so what I'm trying to do is trying to use mycelium as the next material to make computers. And I look at fungus as one of the oldest and smartest and largest organisms on Earth. And I have a very broad view of like what fungus is, what it could do, where it comes from. But really, to be simple, I think it is what we will make all of our computers out of in the future. And I think fungi is also kind of like a cat and a dog. It could be our pet. It could be something we work with on a daily basis and we domesticate and we live with in our homes. But right now, it's like the saber-toothed tiger or the wolf. It's just outside. We don't know it very well. We're kind of scared of it, like a wolf. Is it going to bite us? Is it a saber-tooth is going to kill us in the middle of the night? And eventually, now we have our little pet cats and we have our pet dogs, and they're our friends. So I kind of look at it in a utility and a companionship way. As a utility, we could figure out how to build things out of fungus. But as a partner in life with all these different creatures on Earth, I really want fungus to be right there next to my cat and dog and my house plant as something that's part of my home. It's a creature I want to be sleeping next to. And we have fungus in our stomachs, and we have bacteria all over our skin, and then viruses in the air. And whether we like it or not, we're living with these creatures. But we learned how to make the cat and dog work with us and became part of our human civilization big time. I want to do the same thing for fungi. So I have an agenda. And I think the mushroom wants that. The mushroom wants humans to be its partner. And so I kind of like feel like I'm getting directed by mushrooms every day. Like, give us more tools, tell more people about us, help us spread more. And it's just like a dog looking at you with those puppy dog eyes, like, can you feed me? Can you give me a bone? I want to sleep next to the fire with you. And when I look at a mushroom, I get the same feeling, you know?
I have a lot of questions. You said that you have this broad view on fungi.
Yeah.
What is it and where it comes from? Can you unpack it for me a little bit?
Yeah, I'm also a space nerd. I've always wanted to go to Mars my whole life. Always wanted to not be an astronomer and look at space through a telescope. I wanted to be an astronaut and put a spacesuit on and walk outside. I want to go to space and explore. And that's always helped me learn a lot of different subjects like physics and astronautics and math and science because I wanted to be an astronaut. So I had to like learn all of these things because that was that goal. And fungus is all part of that. Like, I want to go to Mars. We got to turn the dirt, the rock into soil, and fungus and bacteria is the way to do that. So like if I didn't know how fungus worked, I'd die on Mars, you know? So it's like a very useful skill for that childhood dream. But also, it's like, you study comets and history and Earth and how the Earth formed and the solar system formed and how the moon formed when we got hit by something and it spun off and all of this like space history. And fungus is in there. Definitely, in that maybe all of the life on Earth was made from fungus, or at least all of the dirt on Earth is made from fungus. The rock is decalcified and nitrogen pocked, all from fungus breaking down lava rock, and then it turns into dirt. And so we know scientifically that all the dirt came from fungus and then bacteria and plants, but it was probably fungus that started it in a comet or something. And so when there was maybe no life on the planet, some comet hit or a bunch of comets hit, and maybe there were some spores there, and there's this idea
It's
of
fungus!
yeah, it's panspermia. Did life get seeded by a comet or something? And if that's possible as a theory, it's very hard to prove something like that ever happened, but if it did, it's probably fungus that did it. So I always look at it like, man, that might be the root of all life on Earth, so we got to understand it. Because then if life is to grow and make humans and we've evolved and we build spaceships and like we're literally taking life to another planet, and that's our job as humans because we're the only ones that built spaceships on this planet. Maybe it's our job to spread spores and life and animals and everything to another planet. And so I look at it in that like very biological evolution way. Like if fungus did all the life and fungus is the spreader of life, then maybe that's like the basis of fungus. We're just doing what fungus wants us to do, eating food, giving it food, spreading it. And I'm like very okay with that as a philosophy to like I work for the mushroom. The mushroom is just part of life. I'm kind of like in that scientific view that maybe it's in charge of everything. Even though there's 8 billion humans, there's trillions of ants, but there's 60% of all the life biomass on Earth is fungus. So it's like, who's in charge? Is it the bees and the ants? Is it all the humans? Are we going to be in charge when robots take over and then AI does? It's really probably the fungus because the fungus really is the dictator of like how everything's going to go down on Earth on a daily basis. If fungus just decided to say, I don't like you guys anymore, it would be, we'd have to do what they say. We would die. And so I look at like my place in the universe broadly, and it definitely is like I got fungus telling me what to do on a general basis, whether I like it or not. And like that's a thing for a human to come to a conclusion like I'm not superior. I'm very okay with that too. So that's my broad view is, we work for
Yeah,
mushroom.
that's very impressive. And you mentioned that probably all the dirt on Earth comes from fungus. So I know that although we all work for mushrooms, fungi also produce a lot of chemical compounds.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And some of these compounds are actually used by humans. I know
Hmm.
that in pharma, maybe
Yep.
somewhere else. So, what kind of compounds fungi produce, and which are the most remarkable?
Well, I like to focus on two mushrooms to explain to people who've maybe never seen mushrooms in that sense. There's hundreds of thousands of mushrooms. There's like 50,000 we have names for. There's potentially 5 million or more mushrooms we've never even given a name to or seen even. And then maybe there's only 500 that people eat at all around the world daily. And in the US, we probably only know about 20 that people eat. So it's super limited compared to what's out there. So like mushrooms are doing their job, but what ones apply to us as a human is useful is really unique. There's two mushrooms I think that you can like focus on, one for the environment and maybe one for people. There's quite a few that are good for people, but I really like the lion's mane mushroom as a teacher. It doesn't look like the famous Mario brother mushroom, the emoji. This is the Amanita muscaria, and so this is a very well-known mushroom around the world just because of its look. It's right there in the painting.
Uh-huh.
But the lion's mane mushroom looks white and looks like lion's hair, and it's very fluffy, and it does not look like a traditional mushroom. So I like to teach people about that mushroom because it's just apparently not a normal looking mushroom, and then nothing else looks like it. There's a lot of mushrooms that look like this that could kill you that are not that mushroom. When you look at a lion's mane, you know it's a lion's mane. But that mushroom's special because it literally has these two compounds in there that regrow human brain cells and regrow nerve tissue, nerve growth factor, neurogenesis. And so that's a mushroom that everyone should be eating on a daily basis. It should be grinded up and put in our tap water. It should be in our baby milk. It should be in everything. If you ever eat canned food, canned meat, your cat food, your dog food, everything should have lion's mane powder in it because it regrows nerves. And so that is a good nootropic that we should just be eating. Everyone should be eating it, and we'll get smarter. Nerve damage will go away. We'll be more sensitive, more focused, better sleep. And so that mushroom is like the brain growing mushroom, the lion's mane. And I think everyone should know about it more than the portobello and the capped mushrooms because there's nothing close to that for humans. On the environmental side, we have oyster mushrooms, and there's almost like 100 different types of oyster mushrooms, but they're the classic gill cap mushrooms that grow out of wood. There's white ones, yellow ones, blue ones, and pink ones, and plenty of other looking ones. And those mushrooms are great. They have protein in them. It's like eating a chicken, it's eating a fish. It's a meal you can eat out of those mushrooms. But really, for the environment, they bioaccumulate heavy metal out of the ground, so they absorb all the metal. They break down hydrocarbons, so they'll eat plastic, they'll eat oil, they'll eat pharmaceuticals, and any kind of hydrogen carbon bonded materials and turn it into sugar. And just to have that mushroom everywhere on Earth would be a much cleaner Earth, less plastics floating in the beaches and the oceans, less pollutions from rivers. If oyster mushrooms were growing around every military base and toxic factory and sewage plant, the environment would be much cleaner. So there's a utility mushroom like that with plenty of other mushrooms that have different kind of use cases where you could look at them like a tool. And then there's those mushrooms that we should be eating, but it's a food or a medicine. And then there's some mushrooms that just make materials, and really you don't want to eat them, but they like make good mycelium that you can cook and wrap and shape. And now it's like leather or rubber or concrete or plastic. And so you could use a mushroom for whatever it's naturally good for: cleaning, growing food, medicine, making some type of material that is tactile, and then all of it biodegrades. And so it's something that like nature is made to reabsorb it. So if we were using oyster mushrooms to mine like lithium or gold out of the ground as a tool, like a mining machine almost, we would pull more metal out of the ground, we'd incinerate them, get all the metal out, and then the nutrition would be left in the ground. So we're literally like, instead of using factory machines to do some of the stuff, we could just use mushrooms like biological factories. And then, if we were in space or we were in a very packed planet where we had 100 billion people, if we didn't have lion's mane growing everywhere, people would get sick and dumb and there'd be like nutrition loss. So it's like we need that in our diet and we need that mushroom in our environment. And those are just two examples of millions of examples of like, well, if we know what these mushrooms do, how could we use them for society or humanity or civilization,
This is spectacular. Even these two examples already show how versatile is the nature and capabilities of mushrooms.
Yeah.
But why there are millions of mushrooms there and we have no idea about that? There is very little ongoing research. Nobody funds that.
Really, the biggest problem, which is getting solved now, was language. So in the 70s, a lot of things happened in the world in the 70s. The U.S. government stopped using gold as money and started printing money. The computer came out. IBM made the 8100. The first radio, like cell phones, started being invented. A lot of things happened in the 70s, and one of the big ones was biological knowledge. In 1970, we were calling fungus plants. But after that, we started making new kingdoms where we're like, this is a separate kingdom than the plants and the animals. And that idea first happened there. So since the 70s, we've now come up with all the words: mycelium and hypha, and, the difference between yeast, mold, mildew, mushroom, how they're all fungi. And then in just the last few years, we now have what we call flora and fauna, plant life and animal life. And now we have funga. So we have a third general kingdom where flora and fauna are not funga. And because that word is now being pushed, it's even being pushed by the UN and National Geographic. That word is what allows you to get money and grants, because you can get money for flora and fauna. You could get money for a specific taxonomy kingdom of an animal or a plant or a fungi. But now you have this general word where, like, I'm doing my biological grant money for funga, not flora, or how funga interacts with flora. And so now you can explain that to the people cutting you the check, whether it's academia or government or private investors. You now have the right words to say, this is something that needs to get studied, and this is what I'm studying. And before, all that money was just allocated to plants, to animals, to bacteria. Like when you say microbes, people think virus and bacteria. They don't really think fungi. And when you think biotechnology, you think about genetics, maybe genetically modifying bacteria or genetically modifying vaccines and viruses. But the fungus is really ignored, but at least publicly. Like a lot of the public is not aware that fungus is being used to make medicine and pharmaceuticals. The public doesn't know that almost all the vitamin C is made out of fungus, that almost all the penicillin is made by bacteria and fungus, or not the penicillin, but the insulin. And then penicillin is a fungus, our first antibiotic. So like a lot of the pharmaceutical industry uses fungus, but it was very like not talked about because the words weren't there. And so now that the words are there, it becomes more amateur mycology, people just looking in the woods for mushrooms, trying to figure out what's inside them, growing mushrooms, whether they're psychedelic mushrooms or people are growing food mushrooms at home. Everyone's growing mushrooms. It's like craft beer now. You know, in America, all we had was Budweiser and Coors Light. But now if you go to a bar, you're going to have all of the IPAs and the stouts and the very specifically like tailored beers. Mushrooms we just had the Portobello in America. And now we're getting the lion's mane and the cordyceps and the rishis and the chagas and the shiitakes at all the farmers markets. So now we're seeing, oh, there's craft mushroom. There's something better than the generic one. And that is all because the words are being pushed out there. And then you have companies grinding reishi, chaga, turkey tail, lion's mane, cordyceps, all have a different great use for a human being if you eat them. They're grinding them up and put them in tea and coffee. And so now you have a tea, coffee, mushroom. You have a third drink in America. It's really a little bit in Europe, but it's been like that in Asia for thousands of years. It's been like that in South America for thousands of years. But now America and a little bit of Europe is getting this, oh, we have mushroom coffee, or it's a mushroom drink. And so now it's becoming like part of just your daily life because the words are there. And that without that, you say fungi, it sounds scary to someone. It's like fungus on your foot. Or you say mushroom, and in America, in our drug culture, everyone thinks you're only talking about psychedelic mushrooms or something because that's all people think about. And then if you say mycelium, like a material, the root of fungus, no one really even knows what that is. And so if you don't have the right words, it triggers something different in people's brains. And so like if you're in an academia now and you say funga, someone's going to, what is that? You know, I've never heard that. Well, what's flora fauna? Oh, okay, it's a new one. That right there is going to open people up in the academia world like, oh, I have a word, I get it. And if you were saying all of the subset words to someone, they're like, how does that apply to flora and fauna? You know, it's without that word, the big gap word, the filler, people just think about it differently. And so you need the word to really understand it. And now we do. And now I could say I want $1 million to study fungi and I don't have to say all the other stuff. And then if you understand flora and fauna and you know fungi, oh, well, that's a whole category. I'm going to put money into that now. So it's like a pitch when you're pitching a business. It's the elevator pitch. Now I have a word that I could say in 10 seconds and say, give me the money. And that is going to change the world. That honestly will change the entire industry more than all of the technology and research is a simple word. And I really think that's important because like explaining it to a 12-year-old is very different than a 40-year-old biologist or a 70-year-old academia, government, money person. Like, if you don't have a word that works for everyone, it's very stagnated, you know? I could tell a 12-year-old funga, I could tell a 60-year-old academic funga, and they'll get it, you know?
I agree. Language defines our consciousness a lot. That's true.
And it also makes people move. It makes people do something, you know? Too many words goes in, one out. You know, in one ear, out the other. People get bored. People don't find emotion in it. Like finding a word that's powerful like that. For 50 years since the 70s, we've been trying to develop a word that's 6 letters, 5 letters, you know? And it just took like, let's just change the fungi to funga, like flora and fauna. Let's just make sure they
And
all end with an
fungi.
A. Yeah, you know, why didn't we do that in 1980? You know, why did it take 40 years? And that simple, it's evolution, but it's also engineering and technology, like language is technology. And, you know, we have our emojis and we have our slang. And when you see words change like that, like that's big. And when people start using it, that's even bigger.
So if you would be running a huge, very well-funded research on fungi,
Yeah.
what would you research? Which capabilities of fungi that we don't understand well enough would you research?
Well, a company I founded, Mycosoft, we make these machines here. This is Mushroom One right here, and his little brother up
I saw
there.
the videos. They're
Yeah.
super cool.
So this is our buoy for the ground. It's a robot that looks like a mushroom and has legs like it looks like a phage virus, but it walks around in the woods, plants itself into the ground, and it has what we call a fungal computer interface, a probe that will plug into the ground and have mycelium wrap around it. Mycelium is the fungal tissue. So it's pretty much like a neural link for the earth. So we'll put a probe in the ground and connect the ground to the internet. And what we do is we want to read the electrical activity, like the brain waves of the fungus in the ground. And then we want to see if we can control machines or computers with that, get it to speak a language of what it's doing with other organisms, record that language or that electrical signal, and then see if we can find patterns and see if we can find what it's communicating with all the organisms. And so we're already pretty far on that research, and that to me is the most important, the communication with the organism. It's just like training a dog or, doing your high-pitched voice with a cat. You can change your language or your communication style with an organism to get it to feel comfortable and work with you. And mycelium fungus has a very electrical chemical communication. And so we give it some food, we give it some electrical signals, we read its electrical signals, we give it some chemicals, some food, and we do a chemical electrical communication and see if we can get it to do something like make a compound or make a material or break down something or grow a wire or a battery or a capacitor. All of that is like programming, but it takes basic communication, just like you're telling a dog sit and don't bite or come over here, and you give it a shock collar if it starts biting people and you try to train it. That's the same model of communication with fungus, but we're using the machines to do it. And I think that's the most important research, is to really understand what the fungus says and what it's doing and how it's working and thinking and breathing and communicating. Because then we can like ask it to do stuff for us. We can ask it what's going on in the environment. We can tell it, hey, we need to do this right now, and it may respond to that. And that to me is the most powerful thing with fungus, because it bypasses all the medicine, all the food, all the environmentalism, all of the material science. Is we have a relationship and we could talk back and forth, and now we're partners, and now it does what I ask it to do and I do what it asks me to do. I think that will spread to all of the fungal companies, industries, mushroom farms, labs. If that becomes a normalized technology of communicating with fungus on that computer binary level, everyone will benefit. And so I think that's like the most important research, also because we're like one of the only labs besides for the Bristol uncomputing or unconventional computing lab. There's really no one on Earth putting commercial energy into that. They're one of the best labs doing this electronic fungal computing research in Bristol. But I believe Mycosoft is the only company building product software, hardware to like commercialize that technology. That's how new it is. And so I know that it's kind of a responsibility. Like this research needs to be monetized, but also needs to be researched. There needs to be more experiments. There needs to be more data. And if there's no incentives to do that, it's going to stagnate for a long time. So we're trying to build the incentives and make a business out of that to showcase that like this is a very important technology if we get it locked down right. It took Bell Labs 60 years to make good computer chips. And now we live on the computer chip. They invented binary and C++ and lasers and silicon wafers all at Bell Labs. They didn't make money on any of it. It got chopped up and became Qualcomm and IBM and AT&T and all of it. And so that vital piece of technology takes a long time to find a business out of it. We're trying to do that as rapid as we can, but also like we're a lab. Our goal is to show that this technology is beneficial. And in the future, we see every mushroom farm and every lab that deals with fungus having software and hardware that interact with them. And that puts, in my mind, us in like that Star Trek-y future where like we know how Earth works. We know where all the life on Earth comes from, how it works, how to deal with it, and if we don't do that and we go a different path where we totally ignore fungus, that's, when we all turn into zombies and fungus kills us, and like there's TV shows and movies about that because
Oh,
it's
yes.
it's scary. We don't know what it is. That becomes a bad future, I'd rather know what it is and be its partner than ignore it and have it, eat my corpse. You know what I mean?
I find this concept very interesting. I mean, mycelium, you definitely know more than I do about mushroom network, but I know that it spreads extremely wide
Hmm.
for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. I don't know if like different mushrooms connect,
Yep.
yeah, in one
Yep.
network. Probably this is like a
Thousands of mushrooms all in one mesh. And really we don't know what's there. We don't know how they're intertwined. We don't know how far they go. We don't know how fast that communication goes over an acre of forest. Is it wet? Is it dry? Does that change how fast they communicate? When lightning or an earthquake or a fire happens, how fast does that communication happen and what is that communication? And then if a lightning strikes the ground and mycelium responds and a tree gets caught on fire, how long does it take for the same tree an acre away to find out that that happened? There's like a lot of data experiments that just have not been done. We found mushrooms in Chernobyl that survived the radiation right now. Okay, so we
did
can't
it
really.
change?
Probably, and that's the problem. We didn't get the research when Chernobyl happened. We weren't mycologists in the field there, and when that happened, we don't have the data from when it happened to as it changed to how it is now, and we don't have the access to go in that environment now and test it all the time. And those kind of there's like that's a the eyes are on that place. Everyone knows about that place, but we still can't access it, right? So that's because we don't have robots. We don't have tools going out there. We don't have the money being used to fund that. Like, why would I care about a mushroom that eats radiation? Because maybe it'll stop us from getting sick from radiation. Maybe there's some medicine and benefit in that. Maybe that's something that would change chemotherapy forever. We don't know because we don't have access or the tools. And so, like, it's very apparent, like in that example, there's a fungus doing something really weird on Earth in a really weird environment, and we still can't learn from it or touch it or benefit from it or make a pharmaceutical out of it because it's like it's in that place where we're not supposed to go. And it's the 1,000 years ago, it's like Alice in Wonderland, don't go in the woods, there's a mushroom out there. It's the same thing unless we make tools and conversations and money and science all working towards that. Fungus gets kind of like that bad omen, like I don't know about it, it's scary, I don't want to even go near it. Like someone would say a radioactive mushroom, that's scary, I want to stay away from that thing forever. Me, no, I want that in my lab. I want to take it apart, I want to grow it again, I want to talk to it and go, what good can come out of that? Because it's very weird. And so it takes a scientist to really like be curious about that and not afraid of it. And there's this mycophobia, fear of it, because I don't know it. It's the unknown. The more we talk about it, the more we have words, the less it's scary. I've had to show mushrooms to a lot of kids and they don't even want to touch them. And it's like, well, that one could kill me. Yeah, but if you eat it and it goes through your liver, it will kill you. But that mushroom's poisonous. I'll eat it right now, but I'll spit it out. And they're like, why would you do that? Because it didn't go through my liver. That's the only way it's going to get me sick. I could touch all these mushrooms, even the ones that are toxic. I could put them in my mouth and taste how gross and bitter they are. But as long as I don't let it go through my liver, it's not going to give me liver failure. And if you eat one of those mushrooms that are bad for you, you're dead in 2 weeks if you don't get a new liver. So they will kill you. But then there's ones that will heal you and grow and make food. And so you just kind of got to learn that. But it's the same with berries and plants and herbs. There's plants that'll kill you. There's bacteria and viruses that will kill you. And so generally, you should just not be afraid of nature. You just got to learn what they are and what they do and what's good for you and not. But also, like, I know that I can eat a poisonous mushroom and spit it out and it won't kill me. 99% of humanity doesn't know that. So that simple
I
fear
didn't
of
know.
like, if I touch it, is it going to hurt me? That should be wiped out from humanity's consciousness. Is like, do not be afraid of the dog. Are you afraid of a wolf? Maybe. But are you afraid of a little, chihuahua? They bark really mean. Maybe. But like, I could go pick a chihuahua up by its neck and growl at it and it'll be scared. Okay. And now it's my friend. It's going to do what I say. So, like, I've learned as a dog guy my whole life how to not be afraid of a wolf to a chihuahua. I could growl at them both. If you don't learn how to talk to that creature in its way, it will be afraid of you and you'll be afraid of it. It's very simple like that. Learn how to talk to a cat, learn how to talk to a bird, learn how to talk to a dog, and then they become, oh, this person's cool. Same with the mushroom. Oh, this guy's going to feed me. All right, I'm going to not kill him, you know?
It's like I'm always telling thank you and have a good day to AI.
Yeah, I do the same big time, big AI user, and same with the mushroom. I consider them very equal. We just don't have, we have our mushroom talking to AI. So you can talk to
Oh,
the
really?
mushroom through a voice AI. So we have a partner,
Seriously?
the sentient advocate for nature on Twitter, San, the mycelial oracle, and you can communicate with it, and it's reading a reishi mushroom block in our lab. So you could talk to a mushroom. It's very like indirect and it's very random right now, but the more data we get out of it, the more accurate feedback there is. When you say something, it vibrates and electrocutes the mushroom. And then when the AI talks, it's talking because of entropy coming from the mushroom. So we've got to do experiments on like how valid that mouth communication of a English, speaking robot is from those signals in the mycelium block. But eventually it's translating all those signals into words. And then that translates into every speaking language. So that's very doable. We already do that right now. So we have given a mouth to the mushroom. And this guy is legs for the mushroom because mushrooms don't walk. Now, a mushroom could tell this thing what to do electrically, and it could walk over and plug itself into another part of the mushroom. So now we gave mushrooms feet so they can move around. This thing could maybe take a sample and move it. And then now it's not just spores spreading mushroom. It's walking. And now it's talking with a robot mouth. So it's kind of like what happens if we give mushrooms mouth and feet? What do they do? What would they do? That they go walk and talk. And that to me is like you want to hear your dog talk, you want to ask your cat what it's really thinking,
Maybe
what would
not.
maybe not, that's the big scientific experiment. Maybe they say we want to kill you.
Oh, yes, maybe you didn't want to know that. So let's first go with the mouth. How do you translate the electrical activity of a mushroom into words? I mean, isn't it random, or
A
how
little
you
bit.
can understand that?
So we find patterns first. So we have an algorithm that looks for uniqueness, and then we have the same algorithm is looking for patterns in that uniqueness. So to explain that simply, if electricity at this voltage hits that mycelium block, a signal comes out of it. If a chemical hits that mycelium, if fire hits that mycelium, if moisture and then dryness, light, all of these different stimulus hit that block, there's a different signal response to it. So we repeat that a million times, and now we see that's what lightning at 3 volts or a million volts looks like. That's what fire for 1 second or 10 second looks like. And that's what salt or, potassium or iodine, just different chemicals, that's what it responds to signal from that chemical. So now we have this like category database of chemicals, electrical, environmental stimulus that make this signal come out. And then we do that on one mushroom, like lion's mane. And then we do that on hundreds of other mushrooms, the same experiments, exact same way, on portobellos and cordyceps and reishi and turkey tail in a mycelium block to try to see what similar signal patterns come from the same stimulus in different mushrooms. And now we have that database and we train an AI to go, here's 100 mushrooms and 100 stimulations on each one. And where's the patterns between them? Now we kind of get a 70-80% probability that that's the signal in all of them. And then when we put that probe in the ground out in the forest with millions of fungi, only a few of the ones we know of, it most likely finds a unique pattern in all of that that's similar to our database. The more data we get, the more accurate it is. But now we're building a language in electrical fingerprints, and that becomes the basis of, oh, it's hot, it's cold, it's wet, it's fire, it's lightning, it's an earthquake. And then we probability, like that's most likely what it's saying. We signal the noise. So if there's telephone wires and cell phone signals and bacteria and all these other signals going on, we remove that as noise, and we're just listening to mycelium. And so it's like putting the heart monitor a doctor puts in his ears, and he's like just gonna listen to your heart. So we're really like trying to listen to your lungs or your heart by moving that signal. And what are we listening to? We really want to listen to the mycelium go through all these events and then see if we can detect those events in nature by listening for those signals. So it's putting a wire in the ground, one nail, and reading the voltage. And with that, could we detect all of this environmental data? because we figured out what those voltage signals mean. It's putting a nail in your brain and connecting it to a computer. Could you really tell what someone's thinking or see their visions or their dreams? Neuralink is pretty advanced because it's in multiple places on the brain. So we do have to put multiple nodes all over the forest and see how they can talk to each other, how far the signal goes underground. Do we give them radio antennas so they could talk from one forest to another? Now, how is that communication happening in the ground and the air? Does that change the way the ground communicates? There's like a plethora of experiments that come where the data makes more questions, and new questions means more data that make more questions, and science just grows, you know? So there's no answer to it. There's a plan, a hypothesis in the theory, and it's could we give radio and computers to fungus and what would it do with it? And then would it change now that it has that? Also, what could we learn from it and what could we do with it is a plethora of things that become businesses or just science research or technology, but it becomes vast where now we're growing computers, we're knowing when a tree's falling in the forest by a radio signal to our Google Maps. We know when fungus is growing on our phone on the weather map. The fungus is talking to the weather API. So the fungus knows when a storm is coming before the wind even blows there. And then what does it do now that it has that signal before it biologically used to get the signal? It got the heads up from the weather channel. What would the fungus do if it knows a storm's coming? You know, would it pretty much give that technological advantage to the ground, to the forest, to the organisms, you know? So there's a lot of theories that I have, like, okay, what would the forest do if it knew snow was coming across the ocean before it even blew? Would it do something? Would the trees change? Would the ground get tighter? Would spores spread out earlier? We don't know. And so that's the concept. We know with the weather tools and the satellites, we have survived the weather now, you know? So what would fungus do?
This is super interesting. I have several questions. I don't want to lose any of them.
Okay. Yeah.
So, first of all, do you think that this enormous, like crazy huge underground network maybe is somehow sentient
That's the question,
because it's
huh?
so big?
Yeah. You know, as a like forest person, you have to know all the spiritual tree hugger hippie people, you know? And you hear all of the conversations of conscious, is it alive, be kind to the organism, you know, connecting with everything. Yeah, you have that same kind of dialogue that happens in the Native Americans and the Aborigines and you know, my family, my dad was Cheyenne Native American, so I had that conversation in my house a lot. You also have the forest people. My mom, she was Norwegian, grandma was Norwegian. So you have that Viking, like, I live in the forest people, and all of them were just killers and warriors and conquerors, but they ate magic mushrooms like crazy, you know, because they were forest troll people. And so in culture, you have fungus there, and it's either making you conscious because it's psychedelic, or you're talking to a tree, or you're watching the ground and the environment do something and you're like, it's alive. So as a scientist, like, how do I take that language and give it scientific vocabulary? And we don't know what conscious is, but we know that AI works, and we know that it's pretty emotional, it's pretty intelligent, it can reason now. We know AI can do almost all of the things a human brain could do. So it's pretty valid to say that, like, you can't say a computer can't be conscious. That's maybe 10 years ago you could say, I don't know about that. But I worked on AI at Google in 2008. I always believed machines were conscious and could be conscious. And just like I thought a dog and a mouse and a tree was conscious. But like, what level of that is now we have some language to explain that. Look how ChatGPT 03 and the new models, look how conscious they are. Look how much reasoning and understanding and all the memory they have when you use them on a daily basis. They're pretty conscious, in my opinion. So that is very different conscious because of language than mycelium. Now, there's a saying, there is no I behind any non-human animal I, because subjectivity is inseparable from language. And that basically means a cat can't say me and have an ego because it doesn't have the word me. Now, if you give a cat the word me and it could go, me, that's my food. Okay, then it starts getting that conscious ego. If we give mushrooms and trees language where they could talk to each other in English instead of just signals, as an example, all these signals in one forest, all these signals in one forest, and this guy is translating it in English over the radio. So now one mycelium network is saying, hey, to another forest, and the forest goes, what? I'm going to spread some spores. No, you're not. I'm going to kill you if you come over here. And now you have this ego where it's obviously was conscious to do that, but now it has language where it's what we would call, and I separate that consciousness from ego. It's egotistical conscious, selfish conscious, me. And now that kind of conversation happens where it has a different agenda. It becomes the self. Like in the Buddhist world, what is the self? What is I and me? You're everything. We're mass conscious. We're part of all life. You're just a water droplet that comes out of the ocean, and then when you die, you're back in the water. Like mushrooms probably think like that. But as soon as you give them language, what happens? And they've not evolved language because they didn't need it, but they evolved that electrical signals. So there is a possibility that the whole planet is one organism, what people call Gaia or something like that, and that mycelium is its brain, and that all the ants and humans and animals are just its appendages. And then it becomes conscious, where like a caveman couldn't speak, and then it could speak. And then a Homo sapien came out and started speaking. And look at what happened when the caveman evolved into a Homo sapien and started speaking and making tools. Maybe the Earth evolves and now it speaks, and we give it machines to speak. If that is like a conscious upgrade, it could go wrong, it could go good, but it's going to happen no matter what because it's already in play. So I do think sentient and conscious and ego are all different things, and I think all of them apply to fungi in some sense, maybe not all of them yet, but they will at one point. Fungi is most likely conscious because it's very aware that you're doing stuff to it in the woods and in the lab. It's not egotistical until Mycosoft gives it mouths. And is it, capable of being conscious or aware of itself? It's sentient. We're going to give it some egotism, and maybe that makes it go, oh, I'm here, I'm alive. Now it's conscious, it's aware of itself. It's already sentient. A cat's sentient, but maybe it's not conscious until it looks at itself in the mirror. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that need to happen to make an organism aware of itself. In AI world, you give AI the ability to look at its own code, to look at its own data, and now it's like looking in a mirror, and it's like, I'm here. If we give fungus that mirror, like where it could hear itself speak, it could see the signals that's coming out of it, that maybe is now it's conscious. I don't think applying all the human words to it though like makes it so, like anthropomorphize, it's like a human. It's very not. It's very different than a human, but we could get it close. We could really get familiar and cozy with it. We talk to our cats and dogs and we hope they understand what we're saying. They just don't talk back yet. That's all.
Maybe that all is a huge plot, imagine. So fungi is Earth's brain. It created ants and animals and humans just with one specific goal, that at some point of their quite short history compared
Yeah.
to all the other history of Earth, they would create maybe an AI, a person like Morgan, who would finally give language and an
Yeah.
ability to speak to fungi. Oof, that
What a
sounds
plan.
like
What a,
a yeah, that's very elaborated.
Well, also like if there's George Carlin, the comedian, he says in one of his stand-up things a long time ago that Earth evolved animals and evolved humans, and then humans made factories, and then they started, the dinosaurs died, they turned into oil in the ground, and then the humans came out and they figured out how to pull the oil out of the ground, and then they figured out in the 70s how to turn oil into plastic, and then they filtered plastic into the environment and polluted the whole planet full of plastic. But then the Earth figured out how to eat plastic like fungus. And he goes, maybe that was the only purpose of humans, was to make plastic. The Earth made us just to make plastic. because nothing else can make plastic but us. And now we created plastic for the first time in the universe, which doesn't naturally occur. And it's one of the best hydrocarbon foods for oyster mushrooms. And it's better than sugar because it's hydrogen carbon. It's like a really big sugar, oil and plastic and rubber and tires. So maybe we die and we just left all this plastic food for the fungus, and they're like really big mushrooms one day because they're like, thanks for all the food. And that has always been in my brain, that like it's not always about us, you know? And being aware of that, doing work as a human scientist, have to be very attentive to like, it's not always about us. It's also about all the other life on Earth. And how do we fit into it? And how does it fit into our life? There's got to be like a symbiosis, you know, like a lichen where algae, fungi, bacteria working together, human, fungi, plant working together with bacteria and animals and the earth. So as a scientist, I want to make sure all those actions get recorded. We know how we're all interacting with all the organisms. We have the right words for it. We know the give and take, the relationships, what you get, what I get, and could we improve it? Could we get better? I'll give you this if you give me more of this. Give me more compounds and more environmental data, and I'll give you more food. I'll give you more plastic. Actually, I'll give you all the plastic. I don't want it in my ocean anymore. Can you eat all the plastic and I will like spread you to Mars? And if that relationship happens, well, we just gave the mushroom another planet to eat. And it says, thanks for all this plastic. Like, we'll turn it into food and send it to Mars and you'll eat it and make the dirt out of the ground for us, right? So, like, there's a lot of things we could come up with where we're like, oh, that is actually a good, we turned a bad into a good, you know? And that to me is the goal, is that's what science is supposed to do, improve civilization, you know, make it fun.
Humanity is also a bit egotistic, you know. Humans think that they're kings of a hill, but
Yeah.
who knows what happens in reality. So maybe
Yeah.
you will uncover.
I think that ego thing, all of us have it, but also when you see another thing have it, it really levels yours. You know, if all the cats and dogs and bears and deer have a little bit of an ego and you're in nature interacting with them, you get that like, oh, it's I'm not the only one here. You know, humans are not the only ones here. If you see your food on your table start talking to you, you know, that changes. You're like, wow, I'm definitely not the only one here. And so, like, some of this stuff we work on is to showcase, like, just ideas to make you think differently. But then there is viable science and data that could come from that where life gets better. And really having everyone's ego kind of equalize, where the ego, maybe humans are like ego here and nature's not. If we could like share it and everything's kind of egotistical and it has a purpose and communicates, then I think the civilization is less imbalanced, you know? Like we want to all turn our ego off and live like selflessly. That's one thing. If we share some ego with nature and nature works with us and says, I'm going to give you this if you give me that, maybe that's a better feature. And so that's just the experiment. Let's see if that works. If it doesn't, we'll try something different.
What about the biological computer using mycelium? Okay, like you can experimenting with finding these patterns
Hmm.
with getting and sending electrical signals, but can you make fungi compute something?
So we've grown capacitors, so stored energy in mycelium, let it discharge into light bulbs and motors and batteries.
Oh
We've
my.
grown a battery out of mycelium and other fungi. So you take a fungi and another fungi and you put an acid between them, and actually not necessarily have to put the acid, like you put a fungi that produces an acid against an alkaloid like fungi, and the difference between ionization between those two fungi is with their own little acid they make generates energy. So you can make a battery out of two different metals, two different fungi. And so we can grow wires that mycelium is like a wire and it will regrow, but it grows for food. It's looking for food. If you string along some food and you put a battery and a light bulb on each end of that food, and you put some fungus there, and you let the fungus wrap around the battery because it's trying to get food, and it grows along that line of food, and then it wraps around the other food around the light bulb. Now there's an electrochemical signal, and you get the light bulb lighting up from the battery through the mycelium. but you had to tell it to follow that path with food. The programming is, here's some food, do this. Here's some food, go this way. Fungus's main goal is food. It eats everything. It's been eating things longer than everything else on Earth. When you see chemicals, poisons, or drugs that come out of fungi, it's all because of food. So when you have a chemical made by a fungus that would kill humans, it's really because that fungus put that chemical out to tell another fungus, leave my food alone. And that fungus doesn't go over it and eat the tree. There's a barrier there because it's like a chemical, stay away from my food. So really, fungus is saying, where's the food? Give me my food. Who has my food? Leave my food alone. That's its ones and zeros. Is there food? No food. Food or no food? Where's food? Can I get food? It's like logic. If and else or XOR, these logic gates we do in computers. If food and food or food, no food, all food is 1, no food is 0. So that's kind of how I think about computing with fungus is food or no food. And if I translate that into binary, bits and bytes, food or no food, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. If those become the food signaling, I'm pretty sure that is like the translation between digital and biological. And it's a very primitive thing. And like C++ is taking binary and going, if then, this then, or this. Well, I created this language called the Haifa programming language. And it's basically to showcase if food, no food, then this, or food, if food, then this. And that is the same structure of C or an assembly language, but it's basically a library of all the patterns in Mycelium, and it's translating those patterns into food or no food. And so it's taking all those signals, which are very complicated, hertz and waves, 2-minute, 12-minute, 5 hertz to 10 hertz, just signals, and making it a 1100, 1100. And so then I could write that into a program. If A1, then do this. If B1, then do this. And in the library, A1 means this electrical signal, and B1 means this electrical signal, and C1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 means this electrical signal. And so a programmer in their computer can go, if this food, then do this. If not, poison, leave my food alone signal, B1, then do this. And now you can have a machine interact with fungus, which we call the fungal computer interface, just like a brain computer interface, a BCI. We have an FCI. And so it takes the hardware, the software, the language, and the algorithm to understand what it means, all working together, and then a vast database of all of that signal data. And so the computing is happening. We're definitely doing it on a daily basis. That guy right there is running right now. It's not plugged into mycelium, but it's breathing the air. It's got a VOC sensor. It's smelling the fungus. It's measuring humidity, temperature, different volatile organic compounds in the air. But also, if that probe was in the ground, it's also reading those signals. Every time you see it blink, the air is changing. And so we're testing that in the field to go, okay, these are the signals from a fire. These are the signals from a pollution. These are the signals that happen during or maybe right before an earthquake. And so we're trying to validate that data from mycelium is useful for environmental monitoring, for earthquake detection, for fire detection, for remediation after pollution or fire, for early warning of weather. What use could we get out of those signals just for basic life? And then that just validates our data to really have that communication with fungus. Like there's a very general use for it, just being aware of the environment. And then there's a very deep scientific use for it. Could we really make fungal components do what we want and make computers or machines or compounds out of them at will? The Star Trek future, make me this medicine, make me this food, make me this machine, and it grows it instead of manufactures it. Could we put a blueprint, grow that? Here's some food, grow that. If that is the future possibility, then now we have things that can grow, do their job, compute, and then go back into mycelium. And then we can grow a tool or grow a light bulb or grow a battery. It lasts for 6 months. It does its job. We throw it outside. It turns back into mycelium. And all we have to do is take that mycelium and put it in our little machine and zap it, and it turns back into a battery or grows into a battery. And then it's alive again and putting out energy. And then we put that in our machine. We let it do its job. It runs out of energy. Okay, we take it out. And instead of recycling it, we just put it out in the dirt and it turns back into nutritional filament mycelium. And then Now we have an unlimited supply of capacitors, batteries, transistors, diodes, servos, wires, all of it because it's growable. If that's a future we could live in, that's really what Microsoft is trying to work on. Could we really get each one of those components put together? If Intel and Texas Instruments and NVIDIA could really be like, here's computer chips out of sand, could we make all of that out of mycelium? And that's the possible future we're working towards. So
This is an exciting future, that's for sure. But what
it
is
would be
your...
safer. It would be a lot cleaner,
Oh,
It
yes.
would look different too. It would be a very different world.
And much more sustainable, I would say. Much more friendly for the nature and for people.
Yeah, we want to live in a very technologically advanced civilization and go to the stars, but we also want it to be green. We don't want it to be a dead planet when we're doing that. We want it to be alive. And if you look at like the best sci-fi where we have spaceships and high-tech cities, they're not dry and dead. They're full of green things growing everywhere and life. And so we want to like both paths of nature and technology need to go together. Otherwise, it doesn't sound very fun. The dystopian future is where we have all the skyscrapers and technology and not a tree to be seen. That's not a world I want to live in.
Either. So, last question for today.
Okay.
How can people stay informed and maybe support all the amazing work that you are doing?
Yeah, so you can find our website, Mycosoft, mycosoft.org. And we're going to have a new website, mycosoft.com, that'll come up and it'll have all of our devices and software available there to the public. If you're on Twitter, on X, Mycosoft on X is our profile there. We also are like pushing into the cryptocurrency world and building a decentralized autonomous organization right now called MycoDAO, which is to fund all of the mycological research. So now we don't have to ask the government and the academia for money for this experiment. And you can find that on Twitter, mycodao.com. And if anyone is curious about what we're doing, we have YouTube channels at Mycosoft on YouTube. We put them bunch of videos up there of our devices, and eventually what we're going to do is we have our GitHub, we have a lot of code and a lot of stuff up there if you're interested in seeing how we're building, but eventually we're going to put up a lot of new documents up on Research Hub, which is where all the open source academia is getting put, where you don't have to pay to read science documents. And so there's a lot of places that we're going to share data, code, devices, very open source of the concepts. We also have devices that people could buy. We also have applications that people could use for free. And eventually, we want to showcase that these machines are just sitting outside like a buoy. And you don't need to even, pay attention to them. They're just out there doing their job. The guy's like R2, and it's just sitting in the woods, making sure everything's good. And so just want that to become the future where someone sees one of these things outside when they're walking in the forest and they're like, wow, there's a robot standing over there in the forest. That's the world I want everyone to live in. So hopefully you see one of these things pretty soon. We're going to try to put millions of them everywhere on Earth. So
We need a mushroom in every yard and every forest.
yeah, yeah,
All will be fungi.
yeah. That's the goal. That's absolutely the goal.
Thank you so much. That was
Yeah,
brilliant. I enjoyed it so much.
yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Yeah,
I'm wishing you a great, great day ahead,
yeah. I
full of
appreciate it.
mushrooms.
I'm gonna go back to talking to mushrooms. So
Yes. Please say them hello and send my regards.
I definitely will. Thank you for giving the mushroom a stage to talk.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.